What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. Today we're going to talk to you about Faraday Future. So Faraday just dropped their definitive 14A. I want to go over what it's truly saying, what most likely the next steps are going to be, and the worst case scenario. Before we get into any of that, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. And for those of you that have been paying attention to my last several videos for this last week, I have been saying that this Friday after hours was when they're going to be dropping this documentation, only because in at least companies' minds, doing it after hours Friday lessens the blow for the most part, because that's typically when companies like to put out negative news or just negative documentation. So it's been kind of the writing on the wall for the last week, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but needless to say, you still do see it down after hours. Getting right to it though, so they did announce the date of the shareholder meeting, so July 31st, 2024. I do actually have a issue with this. I'm going to break this down in a second and why I have an issue, but regardless, there's 6 proposed items, 3 hot topic ones for the most part. You do have to be a stockholder as of June the 21st, so if you did recently buy it, unfortunately, no dice. You can't really vote on the 6 proposed items, but same goes for if you did sell it after, for instance, that record date, you can still vote. So kind of just be aware that for that. So if you did sell it recently and you were holding it, or I think I might have said it wrong previously, but if you did sell it recently, but you were a holder as of this date, you can still vote. So kind of just be aware of that. First one is to elect the 5 directors. In my opinion, I don't really see that as a big deal. Some investors out there absolutely love diving deep into directors' history just to see if they jive with the company. I do see directors being a very big deal within the company. Just me as a investor, I don't really feel it's justified to waste time to go into dive deep into people's history for that. So that's just my thing. If that's yours thing, definitely go have at it and read through it. But I don't really see, given Faraday's circumstances, that being that big of a deal. But moving on to point number 2, the ratification of this new accounting firm. So this is the news that came out like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, something like that. So I did a video at that time on why that whole scenario is somewhat sketchy. So if you are curious to kind of research that a little bit more, then go listen to that video. But still, for the purposes of this shareholder meeting, it's just to ratify this new accounting firm right here. So pretty standard stuff. Number 3 and 4 are some of the hot topic ones. So this one is to raise the authorized shares. So keep in mind, there's 2 different things. There's the outstanding shares and then authorized shares. Authorized shares can be seen as the cap for the most part. And right now it is at 463 million. They want to raise it to 4.1 billion. So the timing of this is a very big deal, because depending on what order they do it in, it could be very damaging. So regardless, everything that I do bring up, it will all come down onto trust on what management does and in what order, right? And for those of you that kind of disagree with a lot of the things I do bring up, just revert back to a lot of my videos. I've been 100% on point with absolutely everything so far with Faraday. So again, when I'm bringing up the order and how things are going to possibly play out, I'm kind of acting based on previous experience. So kind of just keep that in mind. So this one, point number 3, is a very big deal, as is point number 4. And in my opinion, point number 4 is more of a shock to a lot of investors. I think Faraday has a lot of newer investors. They saw reverse stock split and just thought, oh, they're just having that as a backup. Well, in order for the NASDAQ to give Faraday the rubber stamp, like Faraday has to have had a approved reverse stock split, and this is that approval, right? So they need this. If they do not get a approval for the whole reverse stock split, then essentially NASDAQ can just say goodbye, sorry, no dice. So that's something to keep in mind. Ratio is from a 1:2 to a 1:40. In my opinion, as I've said, I feel like they're going to lean on the higher ratio right here. It could be anywhere in between as well on a side note, but I feel like this is their last time to do a reverse stock split. So it will be a higher ratio. Ultimately, it will come down to the board. The board makes that determination on what they're going to do. But regardless, this is a very hot topic and a interesting point to pay attention to. Number 5, so they do want to add a additional 88 million shares, and that is for the 2021 stock incentive plan, so to be paid out as bonuses and things along those lines. I believe based on the plan it's for non-directors and things along those lines, so obviously that's good. I'm definitely one for paying employees. Retention is key, but at the same time, you have to trust when this is going to be enacted, because again, that could be very, very damaging. And then point number 6 is adjournment. So let's say they do not get the votes that they want for point number 3 or point number 4, they can adjourn it. So this is where I'm going to start off by going over my problem with this date. As I've mentioned, so August the 31st is the date that NASDAQ did say that you have to be compliant with. And as I've said in previous videos, NASDAQ does require anywhere from 10 to 20 consecutive trading days for it to be above $1. NASDAQ is the only entity that knows what ratio. It ultimately determines on Faraday's risk level. And in my opinion, it is going to be more on the higher side, so probably 20 consecutive trading days. So if you take August the 31st, subtract 20 business days, you get around August the 2nd. So they do need to have the reverse stock split kicked off on that date or kind of the corresponding following day. So I believe that's the following Monday. But August the 2nd is a very important date. So this is where I have a problem with this. July 31st. Let's say July 31st, we have the shareholder meeting and they do not get this reverse stock split. It ultimately is a no. Then what? Based on, I believe, NASDAQ rulings, you need at least 48 hours in between shareholder meetings. So let's say what they do is they don't get the votes for the reverse stock split. They have to really rush to book a new shareholder meeting and somehow in their heads change the votes. So they need to get a lot of people out phoning or do marketing just for people to change their votes to a yes. So it's very, very tight. I think they'd have like pretty much that same day because July the 31st. And like I said, they need to have their approval for the shareholder meeting by August 2nd. So they are having a very narrow window. So they're not really leaving much room for failure, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, I think that is why I have an issue with this date right here. There is just it's too close for comfort for the most part. If I am going over any of your heads or any of this doesn't make sense, feel free to drop a comment. I can definitely go over that. So let's start off by going over the order. So let's say point number 3, I'm just going to put AS. So you have the authorized shares. You also have the reverse stock split, which is point number 4. You have IP, which is this, though the incentive plan. And then if you want, just put D for dilution. My apologies, that's very crappy mousemanship, if that makes sense. But the order does matter. So let's say the reverse stock split, when that does happen, that affects the authorized share count. So just be aware of that. Unless there's a little asterisk in the first and second reverse shareholder meetings and the first and second reverse stock splits, there was stipulations in there that they made a point of saying that reverse stock splits do not affect the authorized share count. I don't believe that within this it has that same stipulations. So reverse stock split does affect outstanding share count. So this is why timing does matter, right? Because let's say, like for instance, they do a reverse stock split and then they issue some of these shares for the incentive plan. Well, that lessens the damage. But what if they issue those shares and then reverse stock split? That's magnified tenfold. So the order does truly matter. And then as well, dilution as well is kind of a big part that's lingering over everything. So best case scenario, you will want them to immediately, I'll put numbers right here. So do the authorized share count. So that's point number 1. You would do the reverse stock split. That's point number 2, because reverse stock split would affect the authorized share count. And so again, that would reduce this, even though it says 4.1 billion, it would reduce it by this ratio. And then you would kind of issue shares through this incentive plan, then dilute. So this is best case scenario, and conveniently it just worked out perfectly for 1, 2, 3, 4. But let's say you don't like management maybe not knowingly, but wants to do what's best interest for the company, not the shareholders, the company. What they would do is they would issue these shares first. So this would be point number one. Second one would be this right here. So they would raise or do a reverse stock split, point number two. Then they would do this, so authorized shares, and then dilution 4. And the reason why is reverse stock split, like I said, does affect the authorized shares. But by doing it after the reverse stock split, then this is where you will have like pretty much an unlimited cap for dilution, if that makes sense. Again, I can break this down for you, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways that this can play out, different variations and everything. But yeah, it's going to be a very fun, interesting time. It, again, all comes down onto trust, whether you trust the company. And as what they've mentioned, especially for reasoning for raising the authorized share count, it is to allow the UAE potential entity to kind of merge in. In my opinion, that doesn't make sense, but that's what they've indicated in previous, I think it was the preliminary 14A. So just kind of be aware that this is a little bit more of a breakdown. So let me know your thoughts if there's anything that you disagree with or whatever else. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. One final thing, take advantage of this promo. Simply sign up for a new account, throw $100 at it, and they give you 5 free stocks. Each stock is valued up to $2,000. Kick-ass deal. Link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.